Good morning. This is Bob Long, LADC, state of Oklahoma, coming to you today from a laundromat here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Yeah, got to get the clothes clean sometimes. Actually, it's a king size comforter that's in the big machine. And so anyway, the music that you may or may not be able to hear in the background is some tranquil, relaxing music. I kind of find it soothing. Today we're going to talk a little bit about how the different drugs and substances can be vasoconstrictors. Now, vasoconstrictor is a big fancy $5 term. I'm not a doctor, okay? I'm not pretending to be, but it's where you're, to make it really simple for laymen, it's where the small little blood vessels in your body can constrict a little bit, like a boa constrictor, okay? So anyway, certain substances, meth being one of them, nicotine being another one, will shrink those little vessels, and the result is less oxygenated blood getting to the vital organs in your body, and that's going to cause some damage. And of course, we're going to have maybe you see high blood pressure issues coming up, and someone who drinks heavily, who's 30 years old, that probably shouldn't have high blood pressure issues if it had not been for the alcohol. Alcohol is an interesting one, because alcohol in very, very small amounts is a from what I have read on the internet, is a not a constrictor, but a vasodilator. In other words, it opens up the blood vessels just a little bit. And an interesting story, going back in history, the first televised presidential debate, I believe, was between Nixon and Kennedy. And Kennedy was younger, Nixon was older, and Kennedy understood playing to the camera. He had makeup on, he had a suit that looked good in black and white, because TV sets were black and white in those days. And Nixon had a gray suit on. He looked palely white, very pale. And the people, if you had listened to the debate on the radio, they swore up and down that Nixon won hands down. But the people who watched the debate on TV swore up and down that Kennedy won the debate. So that only goes to prove that people listen with their eyes. That's why bands who are not the greatest have the flashy uniforms. People tend to listen and judge by how they look, not how they sound, which is crazy when you're talking about a band, but it's even more crazy when you're talking about politics and policies and procedures. Okay, anyway, fast forward to Ronald Reagan. Little known fact: Ronald Reagan refused to wear makeup in any of his movies. And the first, I don't know if it was a debate or if it was a State of the Union address. I believe it was State of the Union address was coming up, and he was refusing to wear makeup. And they went to Nancy, and they said, "Nancy, we're afraid that we're going to see a Nixon-Kennedy thing all over again, and people are going to perceive Ronald Reagan as being weak and sick." Well, of course, that's not the case. And Nancy said, "Don't worry about it, I got this." So she goes and pours a little bit of sherry into a shot glass, and she goes up to Ronald and Ronnie, and she says, "Here you go get him, Gipper," or something along those lines, I don't know. And then she takes her fingers after he drinks it, and she pinches the cheeks, breaking the capillaries in his face, and it looked like he had rouge on his face. It gave him color to his face. I remember watching that back in the early 80s, and I went like, holy crap, whoever that was a makeup artist should be fired. There wasn't a makeup artist. That wasn't makeup. That was just Nancy putting some color into his face. Okay, fast forward now to today. Alcohol in large amounts is a vasoconstrictor. So think about this. If you have a fire in your house, and let's say you like your house, okay, and you have opportunity to put that fire out with a little 3/8 inch garden hose that you got from Dollar General store, or you have a big 4-inch fire hose that you just happen to have hooked up to the fire hydrant in the front yard. Which one do you think is going to put the fire out fastest? Well, obviously the 4-incher, because it's going to carry more water to the fire. Well, same thing with blood vessels in the head. Any substances that you're using that's constricting the blood vessels is going to constrict oxygenated blood from getting to those organs. And unfortunately, that has some very negative outcomes. So we used to believe that alcohol only affected the liver. Now we know that alcohol impacts every organ in the body, and it does. And this is one of the ways that it does it. It's not very good for brain cells, I'll tell you that. Interestingly enough, back in the 1980s, we believed in the dark ages that, I had a university professor once said, if you drink, you kill brain cells. Okay, well, yeah, he's right. Okay. He said, but don't worry about it. You have 80 to 100 billion brain cells. And I don't know how he got that correct, but he did. And then here comes the incorrectness of the 1980s. He said, but that's okay. You can afford to lose a few because we don't use the entire brain. Wrong. Brain mapping that we did with MRIs showed that we do utilize the entire brain. And the loss of any brain cells is not a good thing. And the brain will try to reproduce brain cells. I asked the professor, this is back in 1983, I said, well, let me get this straight. My dad drank very, very heavily. So are you saying every time you drank, you killed brain cells? And the professor said, yes, that's right. And I said, well, how did the alcohol know which brain cells to kill and which ones to leave alone? I remember the professor quickly looking at his watch and saying, I'm late for an appointment. And he grabbed his briefcase and scurried out of his office. This is at Central State University, now University of Central Oklahoma in Edmond. I won't say the professor's name. I'm sure he's dead by now. and he never did answer that question. Well, he didn't know the answer to the question. I believe now that it's like anything else. Who does COVID affect? COVID affects the older people more than it would the middle-aged people. And it may affect the young too. So I believe alcohol does the same thing. It attacks the weaker or the older brain cells and probably kills them off first. The others are a little bit more resilient. They get mutated due to the lack of oxygen, but still, they're hanging in there, okay? The beautiful part is we now know that the brain will heal itself if you give it 2 full years of not poisoning it. 2 full years. Okay, well, come on, that's not too much. And you only have one brain. Yes, we live in the day and age of, organ transplants. Your liver goes out, and if you find a donor and get on the list, yes, you can get another liver, or a portion of a liver, or you can get a new kidney, or you can get a new heart, or maybe a lung. But there's only been one semi-successful brain transplant in the world, and I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to think of who that is. Give up? Okay. Frankenstein. Okay. I said semi-successful. Of course, that's Hollywood. There's never been a brain transplant. You are stuck with the brain you have unless you want to make it better. Now, I am borrowing a little bit from Dr. Amen here. Daniel Amen, if you're not familiar with him, please look him up, okay? Watch a couple of his videos. Great guy. He actually cares about people and their brains and success, so I would definitely maybe take a peek at that. Anyway, methamphetamine also constricts those blood vessels, and my very, 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 very first client as a counselor, outpatient, was a methamphetamine addict. He was in his 30s. He'd already had 9 strokes. Now, I'm not saying everyone who does meth has strokes. I'm not saying that at all. But just like everyone who drinks alcohol doesn't get the DTs, and they don't get the the seizures, okay, but some do. Well, this guy did, and I kind of mapped it out, and I saw the correlation between a relapse and a stroke. And I mentioned that to him, and he said, "Oh no, Bob, he's living in denial." I love denial. And he said, no, Bob, it's just coincidence. And about 2 months later, he relapsed. He would do good for about 30, 60 days and then relapse. This is normal. And he relapsed, and within 12 hours of the relapse, he had a stroke. And so when I saw him the next time, he told me, and I said, "Well, are you sure that those two are not correlated?" "Oh, no, Bob." And about 30 days later, he had another stroke, which coincided with a relapse. And he said, "Bob, I think maybe you got something here." Okay, so he had to be a junior scientist. He had to know for a fact that this is true. Forget the fact that he's already had 10 plus strokes. So he goes out and he parties really hard, okay? Uses a lot, uses more than he normally does. His thinking is, if this does cause a stroke, this is the last time I'm going to use, right? That was his thinking. He had a very, very, very major stroke. It left him paralyzed on the entire left side of his body. And he couldn't get out of bed. He couldn't bathe himself. He couldn't dress himself. His autonomy was gone. He couldn't even shoot up, which is probably a good thing. But folks, come on. Be a little smarter than that, okay? Because if you see that pattern, or if you've listened to me and you've had a stroke and you're a meth user, and just sort of piece this together, because I don't want you to wait until it's too late and you're completely paralyzed. So what we need to do is restore the blood flow back to all the organs, to include the brain, and the best way to do that is to stop poisoning yourself with whatever the substance is that you're using. Okay, and all these substances do that. So please, let's be a little bit smarter and a little bit more careful with this. Well, guys, I'm not sure what to call this thing. I'm not sure if we should call this. I don't know, but I'll think of the name of this one. But anyway, guys, thank you for listening. Hey, please hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment. If you leave a comment, I will get back to you. Maybe not immediately, but I will check it and I will get back with you. The more likes I have, the more comments I have, the easier I'm going to be to find in this YouTube world with their with the way they do things. Okay, I forget the word that I'm looking for. Some of you probably looked at my shirt. It says sarcopenia sucks. Sarcopenia is loss of muscle due to age. It's tied with loss of testosterone production, and again, that just happens when you get older. So you have to eat a little bit more protein, you have to exercise a little bit more, and that's what I plan on doing today. Hypertrophy rocks. Hypertrophy is the science of building muscle. Okay, so yes, I have a little bit of an addictive personality, so I research things that I really love. This is a good addiction. That's another video. Okay, listen, thank you so much. I think my wash is in spin cycle now, so it's probably almost done. Till next time, take care. Goodbye.